The content produced on this channel is not considered to be appropriate for individuals under the age of 13. The doll customizing process includes toxic substances, some of which are cancerous, as well as dangerous tools. Destruction of property is also possible. I recommend the YouTube Kids app for individuals under the age of 13. I've been wanting to make Noelle to go with the rest of my Deltarune characters for ages, so Claudine seemed like a good base. Noelle's hair is blonde, and this hair is brown and really full of glue, so we're gonna have to cut it off. To remove the rest of the hair, we need to take the head off. Hot boiling water will soften the vinyl of the head. And my camera's tripod will make the world's slowest descent. Once that's fixed, the head will be ready. Using a washcloth to protect my hand, I can yank the head off of the body without damaging the neck peg. After a quick inspection from the cat, I'll take a pair of jewelry pliers and plunge them into the head through the neck hole. Once inside her cranium, I scrape them around to loosen the glued-in hair plugs, and then pull them out. Removing the factory face paint is easily done with a cloth soaked in pure acetone or nail polish remover, although acetone works better. There is a small hole in her lips, you can see it right there, most likely for holding a bubble of gum. Due to this fact, I do believe that she's from the Ghoul Sports line. It's time to cut off her wolf-like ears so that I can reposition them to look more like reindeer ears. It's amazing what a different placement will do. To secure the ear holes, I cut patches of fabric and soaked them in my vinyl glue. This glue will adhere to the head very well, but the glue itself will stay flexible. This stuff is very strong smelling and very toxic, so be sure to use it in a well-ventilated area and to keep it away from your pets. Since I don't have any epoxy sculpt, I had to get creative when creating an anchor to hold the antlers in her head. I filled the top half of her head with hot glue. Ironic, considering how much effort I just went to get rid of the glue in her head. I actually cut the head open along the lower hairline to make sure that the glue was everywhere I needed it to be, and I used the new hole to finish filling in the areas that needed to be stable. To anchor the ears in place, I attached them to sewing pins with hot glue. I trimmed their length so that they wouldn't be in the way of each other or the neck peg when the head was reattached. Using jewelry wire, I formed an armature for the antlers. And then with a candle flame, I heated the prongs of the antler to help mark the spots where they would go in, as well as push into the hot glue. That didn't really work well though, so I needed to use a needle to open up the holes. Once the antlers were temporarily attached, I painted the scalp to match the color of Noelle's new hair. I first tried to sculpt the antlers onto the armature with air-dry clay, but I couldn't get the look I wanted around the prongs, so I switched to polymer clay. I had to remove the antlers then, because I can't very well stick the whole head in the oven. I had to redo some of the antlers since I had finished them without thinking, and then the wet clay had been squashed by my pliers. Before I baked them, I brushed them with clay softener to try and get them to have a more organic look. Now that I knew where I wanted the ears to sit, I superglued them in place. Once the glue was dry, I used more air-dry clay to smooth out the gap between the head and the newly positioned ears. This time, the clay did exactly what I wanted it to do. I covered the dry clay with super glue before letting it dry as well. Hard clay against soft vinyl won't stick very well for very long. The antlers also received the super glue treatment before being permanently affixed to Noelle's head. I mixed the perfect darker brown and painted the antlers. Then I added some more yellow and white and painted the ears and the clay so they blended together perfectly. Using the same color base will help keep the colors looking more cohesive. I wrapped the yarn around a book before cutting them into many pieces. I unraveled each length of yarn into 4 strands before tying it to a knitting needle and combing them out to make wefts of hair. My craft glue is slowly turning sluggish and old, so I mixed a bit with my basic Elmer's glue. This makes it a bit more fragile, but since Noelle is an art doll from my own collection and I'm not going to be playing with her, I'm not really worried. I have started using a piece of glass from a picture frame for making wefts. I added some glue in a line then, before pressing the yarn to it to make the said wefts. Once they were dry, I peeled them off and trimmed down the glued edge. Turning to her clothes, I decided to make her skirt. I used a pattern for a mini skirt I had made from a piece of factory clothing that I believe came with an abominable. This was actually way back when I first started customizing, so I've had this pattern for a while now. I simply lengthened it and then narrowed the flare a little bit. Once I had a new pattern drawn out, I traced it on a very dark blue cotton fabric. Once I cut out, I fray checked the edges to keep it from, well, fraying. For the hooves, I used Ralsei's for inspiration. There is a difference, of course, between goat hooves and reindeer hooves, but I wanted consistency since this is my line of Deltarune dolls. Using air-dry clay once again, I built hooves, working with the shape of the feet she already had. Turns out high heels make great hooves. Once dry, I used my nail art Dremel to smooth the clay, before adding more clay to patch any cracks and holes that had formed while the first pass of clay dried. Then I started contouring the face with pastels. I tried a new technique, scraping out the pastels onto a piece of very pink paper. The pink part wasn't essential, it was just what I had on hand. Red pastel was so strong it immediately stained anywhere that it touched, so I had to work to cover any areas that were too strong. Once my first layer was satisfactory, I sealed it again using my sealant of choice. More layers of pastels brought out the highlights and pushed back the shadows, as well as creating a rosy blush on her cheeks. For the first layer of her eyes, I used my watercolored pencils, sketching in the shape. The eyebrows were the next step, as well as her little red nose. Then, with watered down acrylic, I painted on her scleras. The next step was to touch up the nose and give it a little more opacity. Noelle has a bit of buck teeth. I wonder if she inherited them from her father, a buck. Anyway, I painted them with a thick daub of white paint. This also covers the hole in her lips nicely. I decided the time had come to reattach the head to the body. I didn't want to risk distorting a fully finished face up. I trimmed down the neck pegs so that the glue in the top of her head wouldn't hinder it. I overestimated the amount of glue and cut it down more than absolutely needed. Thankfully, it didn't affect the structural integrity of the doll. I sketched out her irises with a brown colored pencil. I wanted to give her a shy look, so I made her looking up and to the side slightly. Freckles were an impulsive decision, but they look perfect on her. She has a few in the game art as well. I layered golden browns and oranges on her eyes to give them more depth. I didn't want her to have very heavy makeup, so I gave her eyeliner and lashes, but no eyeshadow. At the very end, I shaded her eyes to give them some shape and depth, and finally added those oh so satisfying catch lights. I painted the modifications on her feet a very dark gray along with her heels to make the color of the hooves uniform. Once the paint was in place, they really did look like hooves. As a nice little touch, I decided to give her a red and green manicure. It made them look more like fingernails and less like claws. I drew in her side part and glued on the hair wefts using Mosekito's side part wig tutorial. Once all of the hair was dried in place, I trimmed the hair just so to give it the hairstyle the sprite has, more or less at least. I may have gone a bit overboard with the sweater though. I dyed some of the blue yarn with gray dye to give it a darker shade that would more match her skirt, though it didn't end up quite dark enough. Then I knit a sweater using an ornament pattern. I will never ever again knit a raglan sweater with colorwork knit flat for a doll. If you're a knitter, you might be wincing with me here. It was worth it though. It looks perfectly cozy on her. And with that, Noelle was done. I really like how she turned out. She's a bit more detailed than all of the other dolls, given that there's about a year of experience between when I first started this line and when I made her. I'm really glad that I got her done though, and she looks great in the snow. I hope you all enjoyed watching. Thank you so much. Bye!